Okay. Welcome to AQAvit Meeting February 24th, 2021. We've got some special guests today, not the whole team, but some of the team from the CAN OSP project are joining us today. We're halfway through the term. This is a 4-month term where Canadian university students are helping us accomplish some pretty challenging goals. Their focus for this winter 2021 term is to deliver change-based testing solutions and help us improve automation at the Aqua repos. So just make sure everyone's able to join. Yes, good. I'm going to probably stop sharing, and if people have this proposed agenda up, we'll work through some of these depending on who's here. It's a rather informal overview, but I also, before we dive over there, I wanted to mention that we do have the work represented in this project plan as well. So just as the 1,000-foot view, there are a lot of items in the plan, a lot of items already done, even though we're just at the halfway mark. Lots of stuff in flight. And as we've experienced, all of the wonderful students who have joined us this term are aggressively tearing down items. So we will be aggressively adding more items to the to-do list if we need to. All right, so I will stop sharing and invite Derek to maybe talk a little bit about some of the stuff he's been doing.
Sure. Let me share my windows.
Great.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Thanks.
Okay. So I worked on comment-triggered PR builds. And this workflow allows you to, on any pull request, you can make a comment. In this case, it starts with the keyword run Aqua, and then specify a number of parameters for the build, and it will run your build and report results. I can go to my own fork where I made a bunch of tests. And so by default, when you just type run Aqua with no parameters, it'll run this build on JDK Math with the OpenJ9 and Java 8. And it also gives a workflow run ID to let you see the status of the build. This one has already been completed, and you can see all the logs of the build. And of course, if you can specify your own parameters. I think I have one on, yeah, here. This one's on JDK custom. And also there's error handling. So if you make an error, it'll give you an error message with unrecognized arguments, and also give you a usage message on how to use the command. And while working on this, I also fixed a command injection vulnerability in an existing workflow, which was to do with the auto test PR workflow. And now I am working on enhancements to this workflow to specify your own SDK resource from a URL, and also to build a JDK from OpenJ9 or using this build JDK action.
Yeah, this is just awesome. And I noticed that Lan has used it extensively yesterday on one of the PRs that we had.
Yeah,
I remember you being pretty pleased about it. Thanks, Derek. That's wonderful. And to say, if people notice that it mirrors the same set of parameters that the grinders use, which mirror the same set of parameters that you could pass directly to TKG if you were running on the command line. So we're trying to keep those extremely similar, so that one, there's no surprises. You don't have to learn a whole new set of commands, and two, it'll make our job of documentation that much easier. Do people have questions about it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On that very topic, if I wanted to know what the list of keywords and possible values are, what's the best place to find them out?
Yeah, what looks like the best thing to do is type run aqua into a comment actually better is to run aqua dash Simon into a comment, because you'll get a usage error and it will list all the help.
Yeah,
However,
I did see that. I didn't realize what the implications were of giving it bad parameters, though. I don't
if you give it bad
going
parameters,
off to run 100 jobs and then coming back with that.
No, it will come back with the usage and tells you what parameter it doesn't understand. But we will be updating documentation as well in the user guide in the OpenJDK test doc. So I'll point to that off of, I'll let people know that that's available when it's up.
And at the moment, only some of the parameters have a set of valid choices, and others, there are just too many to list at the moment, so it's just accepting anything. Yeah.
No, and we've kind of pushed this in to make sure we can use it, and that's why we're following up with enhancements. But yeah, I think the other thing I noticed as a comment was whether we handle cases. So on GitHub runners, there are only really 3 platforms that are available to us: an X Linux, Mac, and Windows at the moment. So if you tried to run this with a platform that was, S390X, I'm not sure if we stop it in that case. I noticed there was a supplied set of an array of acceptable platforms at the moment, right?
Right now, the platforms is just it accepts anything, but
okay.
the
But
build will
would
fail if
it
it's
be able to
invalid.
find and map to the ones that it knows?
Right now, it accepts any of the GitHub runners.
Yeah.
And also 3 of the grinder runners, which just map to GitHub runners.
The Excel ones for those same things, I think, were in the list. So yes, I think the worst case, Simon, would be that if you got some of the parameters wrong, we would attempt to run something as a GitHub on a GitHub runner, and then that action. So to remind that everyone can look at the actions that have been running by going to their GitHub, to the GitHub view and clicking on the Actions tab. So you would be able to, even if you didn't have the link that Derek provides in the comment, you'd be able to go and see all of the actions that have been running and be able to look at the console output to see what the problem was.
Yeah, if running run aqua with no arguments just to get the usage isn't an overhead, then that works for me. I can just about remember that.
Well, I actually think run aqua would run with all the defaults. So just like a grinder, if I just open a grinder and click on build, it will run JDK 8, OpenJDK, the JDK math group against OpenJ9. So run aqua would run us 40 test cases. Run aqua dash and then some invalid parameter would give you the usage. So,
right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So who do we have up next here? I guess I might lean to Lan or Sophia to talk us through some of the other stuff, if you don't mind, or I can bring it up. Let me share my screen again. So what you might get the theme of there is that we have a few, we've added a few workflows, and these workflows live in the standard place where you'd put GitHub workflows here. And we've just essentially seen the Run Aqua one. And now talk briefly about the directory files change workflow, which we've had a few kind of pieces of that. And I'll just come back again to our issue. So that we've broken it out into two pieces. And what this is essentially doing is saying if certain directories change, trigger testing against tests that happen in that directory. So if system changes or perf or OpenJDK changes, it's going to trigger, I think, a sanity dot and then that group name. So if OpenJDK changes at all, it will trigger a sanity.openjdk run at the moment. So not ideal, but at least something. In the case of if build env directory changes, this is different because we're running most of these workflows on GitHub runners. But in the case of the contents of our build env directory, those are all the things we have inside of that are things we have related to Jenkins runs. As most of you know, this folder. So if something in this folder changes, we actually want to trigger a grinder to check that if someone changed any of these Groovy scripts, that you haven't broken the ability for test pipelines to run. So since grinder and every test pipeline we ever auto-generate all use the same exact Groovy script, we can trigger a grinder to verify that at least you can still run things. So that's this piece, and that's still a PR under review. There's a couple last items to check on, but we do see that they're able to, Napat and Yanan have gotten it to the point where you can trigger a Jenkins job and run a grinder with parameters. The main thing we have to do here now is make sure we're able to trigger it as a functional ID or a group ID, because right now the PR has just an individual's GitHub ID there. So we want to make sure we do the right thing here. Anyone who would trigger this, they have to be someone who has access rights to the grinder. It can't just be someone like random, but that's not exactly what we want, because we want to be able to have PRs from contributors who aren't yet in the core test list or the triage list. So we'll have to update this once we get that figured out. All right, I'm going to pass this next one over. JCOV Utilities Investigation and Resurrection of JCOV Jobs. You know who I'm looking at, Sophia, for a quick update on this.
Hey, yeah, so for the JCOV, we'd like to know the JDK code coverage. So initially we have the JDK 8 JCOV build, which uses the OpenJDK build, which means combined with the build. Because initially for the OpenJDK build, we have that JTRAG and GCOV parameters. So which means when we run the build, we enable that option. We can run the build with the JTRAG and get the GCOV information. But right now, that one won't work because the OpenJDK build has disabled the JTRAG test and the GCOV option. So we updated that job, which can directly grab the build JDK binary, and then we run the JTRAG and enable the GCOV, get the JDK code coverage information, which is actually it's good because that means we don't depend on the OpenGDK build script. If the build fail, it won't affect our JCAV build. So based on that, what we want to do is we'd like to, for the developer, if there's anything changed, like the PR, we'd like to know if this PR is covered by current test. If not, we'd like to suggest the developer to probably need to create the new test. So for the GCAV and the GTRAG information, for the JDK build, they actually have that make target in the repo, but it doesn't make sense for the HPR to run a GCAV build because it's really like the time-consuming and memory intensive one. So that's why we re-enable that GCAV or OpenJDK GCAV build. So which means we can, based on the change, like how often the change will happen, we can set up a schedule, like we can run the GCAV build once a week, like weekly. Then if there's a PR, so we can compare the PR with the JDK, like the base, so we know what the change is and compare. Oh, so then we depend on the other one utility of the GCAV. It's the diff coverage. We give the diff coverage the patch, then we can know if the changed code can be covered by existing test. If yes, it's covered by which, and if not, it will give you, oh, it's not, it's no. So we can suggest the developer to probably need to add new tests. So that's the story. And we already finished the first step. We already enabled the JDK8 GCAV build. So which means we can get the general JDK8 coverage information. And for next step, it's just to compare the PR, get the patch, then we run that diff coverage.
Yeah, so essentially we're looking at whether or not there's a workflow that can be created to help a reviewer and the developer. So mostly automating, obviously the developer still creates the PR, a reviewer still reviews the PR, but as that's happening, automation can kick off behind the scenes that goes, takes the patch of the PR, compares it to the results.xml file from the code coverage build to say, here's the array of test targets that should be run against this PR. And we see that there's a gap, and in fact, the reviewer should request additional tests be created because on some pieces of this PR are not covered. That's the workflow. Does anyone have questions on that one?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Perhaps I missed it, but how are the appropriate test targets decided and mapped to the coverage?
Yeah, so and probably it might be useful for Sophia to show, I don't know if you're ready at all to show your screen and what you get back from code coverage tools, but we can map it to the test targets that are in a playlist. So for a particular change, or it's per
so you're actually running the code coverage against the test to determine.
Yeah, so we run, we have an instrumented build.
Yeah. So my follow-on question then would be, because I've kind of been here before, what happens if GC changes? Because everything touches GC. That was the problem we always had.
And so that's for sure going to be the case again. And I mean, what happens there is what happens now, which is we blindly run a whole set. We blindly run sanity.openjdk instead of just the subset of targets.
Right.
So there are certain types of changes. If a certain class file changes, that we maybe not be able to avoid running the whole suite anyway. But in other cases, and we think that's quite a few cases, we can reduce the amount of testing that is needed.
It will certainly be interesting to know. Do you plan to track what is actually chosen?
Yes.
Even if it's just we chose 60 targets out of the 120 that exist, I think it would be helpful to.
Yeah, exactly. So part of this should be, because what the automation will do is it will build a test list. So it will say, oh, adding JDK Lang and JDK Math. Those two targets need to run. So that's a 2-target run, as opposed to a sanity.openjdk, which itself contains 8 targets. So we should track this, and it's actually a good question. It's related to some utilities that we intend to add to TRSS for tracking certain things. But
So yeah,
in the short term, you'll be able to see the test list at the top of the console output to see what was selected to be run. Sorry, go ahead, Sophia.
yeah. So that's a good question. So for we want to do like if it works for either the developer or the reviewer. So similar to that comment trigger. So reviewer can put the comment like, okay, we'd like to see, if it's like a GC, in the JDK, there should be some test. It's related with the GC one. So we can set up this job. Actually, we have that parameter. So we can separate whatever the different target. And in that case, so you can know if it's current by existing, you're interested in the test. So which probably means, I haven't think yet about which probably means yes, for this build, we need to, originally I'm thinking we run all the sanity one, all the extended one, but right now, I think probably we need to separate all the tests. Oh, sorry, not build. I mean, just we can choose which test we are interested in.
Yeah, so, and the other thing to note here is this is the piece, what Sophia was showing is the piece that creates the code coverage results file, but then the automation that can trigger automatically underneath a review can be the run AQA, and then you pass for target, you use the test list mechanism. So instead of target equals sanity OpenJDK, it would be target equals test list, and then the comma separated list of the targets that we see we need. And you would see that in the console. So the question of, would you track this? Can we track this? Yes, we can pull that from console output and track it. And you would see it at the summary of what TKG creates as a summary as well at the bottom, which tests were run as part of this test run. Cool. Any other questions for the JCOV piece? If not, I'm going to share again. Sorry for the back and forth thing here. I guess I wasn't going to go into detail. And sorry, Yana, and I didn't see you had already joined. I should have let you talk directly to the directory change workflow. But I'll just continue to move on here. Welcome. I'm bad at seeing who's joined in the meeting here. But for the tweaks and enhancements, so Derek has already mentioned he's picking up the enhancements, which is an item 2296. We've got some fixes. You might have seen, if you're doing some actual PR, if you're seeing PRs getting tested, you'll see that this is a problem right now, this use correct OpenJDK test repo. It's causing some failures in our pull request testing. So we can see an example might be this one, where you can see that some of these checks failed, but they're failing due to that issue that I just pointed at. So it relates to the fact that we need to make sure we're grabbing the right branch. So hopefully we can close that fix quickly so that you're not seeing this failure in this checks as we're reviewing PRs. All right, update. Oh yes, this is a minor one to say when would we trigger certain kinds of testing. And then over in TRSS, we have some items for the CanOSP project as well over in TRSS. But to warm up and get ready to do some of that, we have a few additional items. We're going to add the visualization for the Renaissance benchmark. And I will quickly pop over to here just so people are aware where that lives. Oscar, last meeting we had kindly demoed some of the additions for DeCapo. So we'll add another one in this list for Renaissance so we can visually see the Renaissance results. The other piece that has recently been added, and I'll just mention it while I'm here, is we're changing this tab to be custom so that we will be able to drop in additional widgets for any. I mean, you can drop them into perf if you want. You don't have to keep all the perf ones in your own. Everyone can choose what they want in their own view. And it'll, every time you refresh, it'll use cookies to keep that for you. But what I wanted to say is the plan for the TRSS roadmap for 2021 is to add additional widgets here, including widgets for the SOAK matrix work that Mesba's working on. And for, I don't know if people recall that we had, we were talking about machine capacity and that kind of thing. And I have an issue where I track the execution time for the different targets. So we'll just add a widget so that it's quick and easy to see that, and we don't have to manually build a table whenever we want to measure total execution time or average execution time for the different targets on the different platforms and versions. So that's kind of in the 2021 roadmap, but some of this work here will be taken on by the CanOSP students. And then I think sorry, go ahead, question?
Is this something that's going to be tied into the graph that we discussed earlier, might end up on the students' plates?
Sorry, which graph?
There was, at one point, many weeks ago, we hypothesized about a graph which knew how many different machines of the different platforms that were available.
Yes,
and
it's exact.
Tell us for a given target set or a given build set whether or not there was spare machine capacity to handle that.
Yes, so that was, and that's what I was exactly. So I believe I own this issue, which is now well down the list. Oh boy, growing quickly.
It's somewhere. It's in there.
Yeah, that's right. And so if you see, I want to find it because I'd like to assess test target execution time. So you'll see that there's two types of tables that I built by hand, and these are things that we can just automate and have a widget for. But essentially it goes and queries TRSS because TRSS has an API, and it asks TRSS to answer what is the average time for particular targets, and it responds to you, tells you the targets, their average times, and gives you the total here in milliseconds. But now I want to be able to put it into this human readable graph, and I want it to give me totals. And then given those totals, I want to be able to cross-reference that. You can see down here, I want to cross-reference the totals with the number of test machines and then figure out, well, if that's true, what's the fastest we could run anything? I also want to be able to determine what's the best way I can parallelize the test runs, given the number of test machines I have. So what's the fastest I could run a particular target? And you can see that we are in deep doo-doo here on certain platforms where we don't have enough machines to be able to cover the amount of testing we have, in which case I have to go to the build pipelines and change the the weekly and nightly test list to adjust to this reality that I only have 4 machines. So yes, that's what I'm attempting to do, or that we're talking about. And I think Oscar, who is a long-term intern working at IBM with Lan and team, is also looking at some of this roadmap. But we definitely want to involve the CanOSP students for some of this as well. Yeah.
Well, this all seems a lot more detailed and frankly useful than the issue which I've linked in the chat channel, which my issue essentially adds up to a "wouldn't this be cool" list,
right?
Which I think there's a lot of overlap there. Do you reckon we can close that dashboard issue if you think that everything that's useful in there has already been covered by this?
Yeah, what I'll do, so I'll remember, and sorry, I lost track of this issue because it's over in one of the repos that I don't look at as closely. I'll take a look at what's in there and we can transcribe anything that we think we need to over into the main one.
Yeah, well, as you're saying, it's best not to have too many issues. So if all the important bits in the dashboard issue 17 are already included in the issues that we currently have for this work, then there's no need to have too many baskets.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Whatever the metaphor is.
Thanks for reminding me of that. I'll take a look and then I can move things over and close. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then I know I recognize we're over time here. I might ask Renfei to say a quick heads up on this one. We won't show anything or demo, but maybe a couple words on all that work you've been doing, Renfei. If we still have Renfei here. Oh, maybe I've lost him. Okay, well that's all right. What I did then want to share is that change that is the link to on the heads up. You might recognize that in the playlists we had a tag called subset, which actually most of the time pointed at version. So subset 8, subset 11 plus, that kind of thing. So we've gone ahead and changed that tag name to say version, so it's not so confusing for people. A subset was used initially because we also allowed for things like Valhalla and other branch names, but just to keep things cleaner and clearer. Renfei has gone through 1,000 playlists and made those updates for us and made the update in TKG. And already you would see with that auto test exclude that he was already taking in the -ver to change subset. So that's kind of aligned as well. And I know Simon wants to ask, where is this documented? I believe Renfei's updated the user doc guide, but I will note that I owe a giant documentation overhaul to everyone. And maybe I'll have to put it on my top priorities list within the next week to get that done. Any other questions? Welcome to the students, and I can't express enough how impressed I am with how they've dived in and become part of our project. So kudos to them for understanding and getting mixed up in all this quite complicated and large mechanisms we have. But looking forward to the second half of the term, as now we're moving into some of the juicy bits. Any questions or any other business people wanted to cover today before we close? If not, we'll call it a day. Thanks everyone, and thanks so much for all the great work that everybody's doing. It's really encouraging. Okay, take care.
Take care, Shirley. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.